Welcome everybody to the CILIP Cymru Wales session, where we are absolutely delighted to have Kate Robinson with us today. Kate is a university librarian from the University of Bath, and Kate is our incoming president for CILIP, currently vice president. So hello, Kate.
Hello, Lou. Hello, everyone.
Now, what we thought it was be really good to do was touch base with Kate and ask Kate some questions to find out a bit more about Kate, so you can learn more about her. So I'm just going to begin, Kate.
Okay. So
what is the best thing that you have discovered in the last year?
So are you thinking about professionally, or are you thinking about just in life in general?
Anything that really comes to your head that you think that is the best thing. Could be professionally, could be personally, or you could give me both.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I think personally, let's start with the personal, because I am very lazy, but I've discovered that getting up early in the morning and going for a walk is fabulous. And that has just been absolutely wonderful. I've been really enjoying that. My favourite thing has been getting up almost with the sun and just walking, because I'm lucky enough to live in the countryside. So as I walk to meet a friend who's also likes to get up early, because they're a doctor, so you have to get up early if you're a doctor, we would walk and we would meet just as it was becoming light, and then we would encourage our reluctant dogs who weren't keen on the dark to accompany us on a nice walk first thing in the morning, and that was just gorgeous. Didn't matter what the weather was like, we were out there laughing, enjoying ourselves, watching nature, and just feeling very proud of ourselves. And probably doing it before we woke up properly was the thing that actually got us out of the house in the first place. I think if we'd have stopped to think about it, we might well not have done it. But I think that was something I really, really enjoyed, and something I'm going to keep doing. So I'm pleased. I'm quite proud of myself for that. After 50 odd years of not doing any exercise, I now enjoy walking.
Oh, I think that is brilliant, and how nice to do it with a friend as well.
Yeah.
But tricky during the different seasons as the light, as the morning comes at different times. So sometimes you must have been in a lot of dark when it was actually probably a decent time in the morning.
Yes, absolutely. That was a tricky one. And as I say, reluctant dogs who don't like to walk in the dark necessarily, but but we encourage them, and they're relatively portable, so we could encourage them nicely.
What dogs were they, or are they?
Jack Russell, and I think the other one's a cockapoo, little fluffy black one. Not mine, that's my friend's.
Yeah, no, fabulous. Well, yes, I did guess that from when you went, what is it? I didn't think you'd think that about your own dog.
No, I think I do that. I do know what mine is.
Brilliant. So what about professionally?
Professionally, actually, what I've really enjoyed, and I think this is to do with the social, with the media, with the using the IT and stuff, is just the collegiality that we've seen in the last, 18 months or so, and I think it's that feeling of we're all in it together, and we've all got to get through this. And in academia, you sometimes end up with a bit of a kind of academics and professional services divide, particularly in formal meetings, where sometimes you're seen almost as not. I don't think you're necessarily seen as support, but that divide is the voice of the professional services is not necessarily as strong as the voice of the academics, or you may not actually be invited to the meeting in the first place. It can be a little bit of an afterthought. And that really has not been my experience in the last 18 months. Now, maybe it's something to do with the fact that you don't have to account for everybody and buy everybody a cup of coffee in a meeting, and that therefore, how many chairs you've got and how many cups of tea and how many biscuits you've got come into play, and the actual logistics of it, because it's just inviting people on Teams or Zoom. But to have everybody around the table, everybody's expertise, I think it's done the most wonderful job of bringing everybody together, everybody being valued, and everybody really having something to contribute. That is something that has certainly been in evidence where I am, and I'm sure it has everywhere else. And it's beginning to change the structure of meetings going forwards, and the idea of how can we really be agile, how can we really be responsive, and how can we provide the best services and the best academic experience we possibly can for our students together. And I think that's been a real eye-opener for me. It's been lovely to be in that situation, and I think it's really shifted the dynamics a little, which I've really appreciated.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. And you're right. I mean, it's amazing to see the shift and actually the positive experiences that people have taken from a more digital experience, though sometimes it does lead to that same old, let's have a meeting for the sake of a meeting to have a meeting and a meeting. And I think some people had said to me, do you know, I used to attend a lot of meetings, and now I attend an awful lot of meetings. But it's interesting to see how institutions and organisations and how they are changing that to have things like no meetings on a certain dedicated day, like a Friday, or how they're starting to say to people, think about doing 45 minutes instead of an hour, or 20 minutes instead of half an hour, and really structuring them differently so that people just don't fall back into that same old. So yeah, no, that's fabulous. And that's also really great to hear about the positive experience that has been for you in terms of the divide that is often there and that we always hear about, especially on the academic side with the services and academia. So that's really, really positive.
Yeah, I think it's excellent. And I was in Senate earlier this week, and actually those discussions around one particular meeting that I was in, which was called, it's not a very snappy title, it was the Resilient Curriculum Project Team. So I think the name change is required. And they're thinking of creating a new education board, which does keep us all together, but doesn't get bogged down in the kind of quality standards and all of that element, which still is incredibly important and needs to happen, but can go through the machine that is the university in a different way, while leaving possibly more of the fun stuff for us to be thinking about in a different meeting. But how the two interact and who needs to be around which table, I think, is a really, really interesting question, and one which is a lot more open in its questioning than perhaps I've seen before. So really good stuff, I think.
Yeah, no, that's going to be exciting to see how that progresses.
Yes, absolutely.
So here's a random one. If you were to have dinner tonight with anybody in the world, whether they're alive or dead, whatever, whoever, who would they be?
Well, when I was little, I used to really like Ladybird books. And my favourite Ladybird book, now this is going to age me because a lot of people might not know what Ladybird books are, but my favourite one was the Ladybird Book of Pirates. And in the Ladybird Book of Pirates, there are two female pirates. There's Anne Bonny and there's Mary Read. And Anne Bonny had red trousers. So I'm sorry, way better. So I think I would really like to have dinner with Anne Bonny, because in a I was going to say a profession, I'm not sure as piracy is a profession per se, but in a situation which was very much very much a male dominated world, if you like. She was there. She was, I don't think she was a particularly nice woman necessarily, who knows, but she was there, and she was there as a woman. She wasn't hiding in any way. And I have to say, I think her life must be incredibly exciting, and I would quite like to hear from her about what she was up to. What I wouldn't like to do, though, is eat whatever it was that she'd normally be eating on a pirate ship. I think if we could maybe have somebody else along who could actually cook well. And
is there a famous chef you'd like to have?
Well, yes, that could be nice, couldn't it?
Yeah.
So maybe we could just have someone to do the catering as well. But I think I'd quite like to meet her. I think she'd be fun. I could say something terribly literary and erudite, but I just kind of think I wouldn't mind meeting a female pirate.
I think that's amazing. And whenever I've asked that question, and I do these sometimes, no one has ever said like a character out of a book. So I absolutely love that. And I wonder if the internal usage now in the public libraries of that specific book is going to go up. People watching this might be like, I know that one. Let me
the Ladybird Book of Pirates. Yeah, she was great. And a real person. She was a real person as well. I think she was married to Calico Jack, or one of the other piratical people. But she was yeah. Anyway, there you go. One of the only two women in the whole book.
Maybe that's a challenge for all of us to go to our own local public library, if we don't work in one, in our local one, and actually go and have a look and see if we can find out who she was married to and what does she eat on the ship.
Nasty biscuits, that would be my guess. Nasty biscuits and grog.
So tell us about your career and how you got to where you are today.
Well, I think like many people, I was reading something by somebody the other day, and they said exactly the same route that I'd had, which was school work experience. What a marvellous thing that was. I had a week's work experience, and I was lucky enough to work in Macclesfield Public Library, and I absolutely loved it. So much so that they gave me a Saturday job. So I did that. And then I went off to university to something completely different, did a degree in theology, and completely forgot about libraries. But that first piece of, well, I didn't forget about libraries. How can you forget about libraries when you're doing a degree? Yeah, exactly. However, I forgot about the other element of working in them, the practical side of being somebody who works in a library rather than somebody who works in a library, if you see what I mean. So this language is tricky, isn't it? But yeah, so after my degree, I spent a bit of time doing different things. I taught English as a foreign language for a bit. I did a bit of temping, and did a bit of volunteering, and then suddenly remembered libraries. And I remember saying to my mum at that point, oh, I've just remembered, I'd really like to work in a library. That I've forgotten about that experience, and I absolutely loved it. And she said, well, I knew you'd always do that. I said, well, why didn't you tell me? And she said, well, if I'd have told you, you probably wouldn't have done it, would you? So fair enough.
That is true, Kate, that is true.
Absolutely. So that then took me into, I was in Manchester at the time, that took me into a number of different libraries. So I worked for Manchester Public Libraries for the West area. That was wonderful, really enjoyed that. And then I got a job on something called the Manpower Services Commission scheme. And that was working in Chetham's and the Portico libraries. And Chet's is a private reference, it's a public reference library, the oldest public reference library in Europe. Wonderful place. We were looking at the collections and finding things and discovering stuff that hadn't been rediscovered for many years, and then making sure that people knew about it. And Portico is a private members library with a standing stock of Victorian literature, and that was wonderful. So I worked there for a while, and then went off to library school and did my at Manchester again. And worked with did my master's. Well, at that time it was a diploma, but converted to a master's later with a fabulous group of people. They were absolutely wonderful. And then after that, I got a job in academia. And I had two jobs, actually. I was interviewed for a job in a public library and a job in an academic library. And the academic library offered me the job first. And so I said, oh, yes, please. So I worked for Manchester Poly. After a while, though, I was working in the business library in Manchester, and a job came up in J. Walter Thompson, which is the advertising agency. So I worked there for a while, and that was fascinating, actually, working in the commercial sector. It was so interesting. And advertising agencies in the 90s, can you imagine? It was all red braces and presenteeism and long lunches and
taking big phones.
Yeah, very, very big phones. I remember when I got my chartership. No, it wasn't me. And my colleague I was working with, Jane Marshall, got her chartership there at the time, and the MD went off into his office and just came out with a bottle of champagne he happened to have in his office.
Wow.
Why wouldn't you? And pass that over to Jane. So yeah, worked there for a while, and then I wanted to teach people how to find information. And so the finding it for the clients and everything else, while very, very interesting, I mean, really random things like, can you find me an Esso, a tiger cub for the latest Esso shop advert, that kind of thing. Wonderful, wonderful inquiries, but lots of stuff that I was thinking, actually, some of the things they were asking, I was thinking, you could do that yourself, So back into academia, back into the business library, back to Manchester Met, and then moved to Bath. And that was 20 odd years ago. I intended to come here for a couple of years, but in the end, I stayed for a lot longer than that. And I became the university librarian here, I think 2012. So that's, but it's not an enormous institution. So the lovely thing about a medium-sized university, we're about 17,000 students now. We were about 8 when I joined, is that you get to do a little bit of everything. And it's a lovely place to live. And I've got some fabulous colleagues, both in the university and also in all the networks that we're a really collegiate profession, aren't we? And we get to do lots of things with lots of people. And then parallel to that, so that's, I guess, is working life stuff I get paid for. I also kind of, because I was in a job for quite a long time in Bath when I first moved here, I guess you get the opportunity to move sideways and to do things differently and to think about other stuff. So I have done a little of that. I've been chair of governors for a local first school, which has been fabulous doing that. They have an odd system in Somerset, maybe, where you go through to from reception through to year 4, and then you go to middle school, and then you go to college. So that the real littlies, basically, the little first school. That was fun. And I was a magistrate for many years as well. So lots of opportunities to sort of do different things, and all the way through just try to engage with CILIP as much as I could. Lucky enough, when I was doing my diploma master's course in the first place, there was a real emphasis on your next step is go get chartered. And so that's what I did. And then having done that, once you're chartered, CILIP then write and say, have you thought about being a mentor? So I thought, oh yes, well, I'll do that now. And then the opportunity to become an assessor came up. So I applied for the Professional Registration Board, as it was at the time, or panel, I think as it was at the time, can't remember now. That was back in 2000, actually. And became an assessor and did that for years. And that was so wonderful because, you know, that such a privilege to read people's professional journeys and to read what people write from all sectors. Just wonderful stuff. Absolutely love that. Lucky enough to be elected as chair of that board, which I served for a few years doing that. And then more recently, we've reviewed professional registration, and part of that review has created a wonderful committee called the Sector Development Committee that sits between the Assessment Board and the and CILIP Board, and really puts professional registration and accreditation and all the wonderful stuff that Jo Cornish and her team do with Trailblazers and apprenticeships and everything else all together in one big bundle, and really makes it highly relevant and very visible to the board. And I think that's just wonderful. So that's now where I am instead with regard to CILIP, thoroughly enjoying it. And what a privilege, it's great.
What an amazing career. What an amazing experience that you've also had to look back on, and all those different areas that you've worked with, because you really do have a very blended experience and mix, and the advertising agency is not one that you hear that often. So very interesting to hear how information professionals can get involved in those kind of environments, and probably still can now. And I think there's probably even more opportunities now than there were before, especially when it comes to digitization of content. And also because as a world we've become so digital that there is so much information out there, and it's just phenomenal. So
yeah, I think that's very true. I mean, one part of that job, I'm sure they don't do this anymore, this is something that automation would have helped with massively, but we used to have to read every single newspaper and all the trade press every morning for the clients, and then we would create a clipping service, current awareness service. But there's something there about actually seeing it physically, I guess, and pulling the advertisements, so you'd have a big ad file as well at the same time, and you'd be looking at consumer profiles and kind of, you know, what people were saying about people and stuff. But just the opportunity to be able to start with a big pile of newspapers and work your way through it was just great. It was really good. But being able to then share that knowledge with other people, I just kind of think there's probably so much more added value now in a digital world. I mean, that was fun doing that in that way, but to actually sort of, you know, construct the searches that will actually find you that digitally, deliver it to somebody's desktop. I'm guessing this is, you know, probably what people are doing, but then adding the value around it as well, and having the time to do that. So really demonstrating your worth as an information professional, I think is must be really wonderful to be able to do that now. Must be quite different.
Maybe one day we'll have to follow up with like one of these chats with someone who actually works in that industry now.
That would be great, actually. That would be really nice to understand. It would.
It's extraordinary though, because it's not really an area that I really was thinking about, that's where some information professionals may be working, but it just shows you the far reach that the community has and the potential opportunities there are. So what have you found most challenging in your career that you've had?
I think being managed by somebody who isn't a librarian is tricky.
Yeah, very.
Yeah, I think that's,
I'm not a librarian, but yeah.
I mean, I think that's hard for someone who isn't a librarian or an information professional, so that you're almost constantly doing a selling job of because I think we all know what we do, of course we do, but a lot of what we do is being such enablers and facilitators that are the actual stuff that goes on. It's almost like, I suppose, like a swan on the water, isn't it? The amount of paddling that goes on underneath is not visible and is quite difficult to quantify sometimes to somebody who doesn't really understand what it means. And we use lots of shorthand, of course. So we've just, I don't know, catalogued that, or we've done, you know, whatever. The intellectual input around that and what that then means is something that's, I don't think people really realise what it is. And I think when you're managed by somebody who isn't an information professional, that can be really, really tricky. Because, as I say, the ease with which we seemingly do things is deceptive. And the actual skill that goes into that is something that people don't necessarily know unless they've been in our world. I mean, I think there are ways around that, as I mentioned, with the MD of the ad agency going off and getting his bottle of champagne for Jane. What we also did was our boss at the time was the head of planning, and Jane rather sneakily got him to read her chartership. Now, that's a very clever way of getting your boss to know what you do without saying, you don't know what I do. And it flattered him by saying, I'd really appreciate your view on this. But what was really meant, I think, was, I'd really like you to read this so you know what we do all day. And that was very, very empowering for us, actually, and made a massive difference. But that being managed by somebody who doesn't really quite understand your world is a challenge, and one that I think we do need to rise to, because there's a few stereotypes out there that I think need moving on. But it's not really that. It's just that our success is making things seem easy and helping others do stuff. And sometimes I think that can hide our skill set if we're not careful.
And library teams have evolved so much through the years. In terms of having to adapt to so many different things that are happening. It's an area that I have done sessions on myself with library teams, where they've talked about that and the challenges that poses for them. And it's something that we've been talking about recently with some other groups here in Wales about setting up a session where we're going to get some people who are going to talk about the lessons learned and the best practices and the way that they've dealt with this type of situation, because it's really, really, really important that the value of the library and the library team are demonstrated throughout the organisation that you work with, whether that is local government, whether that is research institution, whether that's academic institution. Regardless, I often find that the library is often overlooked, and it's incredibly valuable, and the people in it are exceptional. But then you are also fighting against other departments who feel the same.
Yes, that's fair. Yeah. I mean, a couple of years ago, I created a new post within my library called the Impact and Engagement Librarian. And they work with colleagues at Bath who are also the library engagement team. We've got some, I mean, there are wonderfully creative people in all libraries. But this particular team really are spreading their wings and being incredibly creative in the way that they engage. But to have somebody whose role it is to do that as well as the people who are enthusiastic and willing to help, has been really good for us, I think. And I'm envisaging we'll probably see more of those kind of posts coming up as we go along.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I kind of think, I kind of think we're sort of a little bit like, you know, when you go to a theatre and everybody's dressed in black and they come and move all the scene shifting around, and then the act happens, and then they come back in and they move everything else around, and then the next thing happens. Kind of want to make sure that, you know, we're taking a bow as well, not just moving the furniture.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lovely way of putting it as well, because it visualizes it for people and it puts it into context. So what is the best piece of advice that you have ever been given? Whether you do it or not is another question, but
I think it's not advice so much as a kind of motto, if you like.
Oh yeah.
Because I think we all get a bit too het up about things, and I think sometimes it's quite difficult to put something down and move on. And I think it's really important that we do. And so one thing I've always rather liked is a Bugs Bunny quote, which is just another day, another carrot. And you just get on with stuff. And I do think there's a lot about just being able to just go, right, brush yourself off, move on. And, you know, very positive rabbit, isn't he? Let's accentuate the positive and move forward.
Well, you know, if CILIP are going to do any kind of social media promotion about this this video, it's going to be that quote, isn't it? Listen, or let's discover, as Kate talks about.
Carrots and rabbits.
It's brilliant. So so let's finish off with one final question.
Mm-hmm.
Now, because of your background and because of what you do, and also because of all the different things that you've been involved with, how do you recommend that people can make the best use of the updated PKSB and professional registration?
So I think it's hugely valuable. I think it's valuable from an employer's perspective and from an employee perspective, professional perspective. I think so the PKSB has been refreshed recently. It's an incredibly valuable reflective tool, and in refreshing it, it's really encompassed the knowledge management and the data and all these other areas that we are now so much more recognised in, which is extremely good news, I think. So I think that's what the new PKSB gives us the opportunity for the real breadth of our profession to find a home in it. As a starting point on an individual level to look at that and to think about where you want to go and what it is that you want to do next and what you might want to develop is an incredibly useful tool. And anybody who's engaged and committed to CPD gives huge value to an organisation. And I like the reflective part of it as well. I like the fact that we have people working in our organisation who are looking with a slightly critical eye at times about what we're doing. So you get invited into different places that you might not normally be, like a meeting that you wouldn't normally go to, but you might want to go as an observer. And then actually that sort of reflective practice on what you found from that, what could be different, the ability to find your own professional voice, if you like, and to be able to share that with colleagues for the betterment of a service. We have people who are thinking through what's happening. That's way more important than people who are just accepting. And I think that's what professional registration does, is it allows you to find your own professional voice and your own place. And for an employer, that I think that is incredibly helpful. To have somebody as a critical friend in the organisation as part of your organisation is a wonderful thing, I think. And to be able to give people the opportunity to be able to express what they're feeling, I think is very healthy. And I think the value that it gives, everybody has different perspectives, and the more perspectives you can get on a service, I think the better your service is going to be. So, and that commitment, that ongoing commitment to CPD, that, you know, once you've gone through that process, that ongoing commitment to revalidation, and thank goodness that's a more straightforward process now. I think the IT there is a lot smoother than it ever was, and it really is I find personally a very valuable process to revalidate and just to think about that kind of so what question. So what have I done this year? What have I learned? What have I done with that? You know, I think that's incredibly valuable for me as a person, but for me as a university librarian, to have colleagues who are going through that process is incredibly valuable too.
Oh no, fantastic. Kate, I want to say thank you so much for joining us today at our AGM. Obviously, you and I are not there right now.
No.
But everyone will be watching this live. So thank you so much for taking the time out to join us. And we look forward to you being our new president in, what will it be, January the 1st, 2022?
It will, and thank you, Lou, and thank you, everybody. It's an absolute pleasure.